A 4-year-old street urchin hears crying coming from a tree on the highway. She realizes something terrible was about to happen. And then she appears from behind and does something incredible. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. The relentless midday sun beat down on the dusty highway when the small figure appeared on the horizon. Only 4 years old, but looking half that age due to the extreme fragility marking her skeletal body, the girl walked barefoot on the hot asphalt. Her tiny feet left almost imperceptible footprints in the dust, while her large, sunken eyes searched for any sign of hope in that desolate landscape. Dressed in rags that were once clothes, she carried on her fragile shoulders the weight of a life no child should know. Her disheveled hair danced in the dry wind, and her pale skin showed the signs of malnutrition that had accompanied her for so long that she couldn't even remember what it was like to feel full. Hunger was her constant companion, a familiar pain gnawing at her insides as she moved forward, guided only by the survival instinct the streets had taught her. Each step was an effort, each breath a small victory against the weakness that threatened to knock her down. It was then that a sound cut through the stifling air of the day, a desperate, anguished cry that echoed from somewhere nearby. The girl stopped, her keen ears picking up that lament that seemed to come from behind a leafy oak tree growing beside the highway. Her childish curiosity, one of the few things street life hadn't managed to strip from her, spoke louder than exhaustion. With faltering steps, she headed towards the sound. Her trembling legs barely supported her, but something inside her impelled her to discover the source of that cry that touched her heart in a strange way. As she approached the tree, the sound became clearer, more urgent. When she finally rounded the thick trunk, the sight that awaited her left her speechless. There, crouching on the hard-packed earth, was a man who looked like he had walked straight out of a Hollywood movie. Tall, with broad shoulders and sculpted features reminiscent of those heartthrobs from those shows she sometimes managed to glimpse through store windows. He held a baby in his arms that couldn't have been more than a few days old. The man, who appeared to be about 30, wore expensive clothes that contrasted sharply with the rural setting. His dress shirt was rumpled and dirty, as if he had spent hours in that uncomfortable position. His eyes, green as emeralds, were full of tears and terror as he gently rocked the baby, trying to soothe the cries that echoed through the morning. But what caught the girl's attention the most was the expression of absolute dread stamped on the beautiful man's face. His eyes kept darting towards the highway, as if expecting something terrible to emerge at any moment. His hands trembled as he held the child, and she could see beads of sweat dripping from his forehead, despite the cool breeze blowing through the leaves. The baby cried loudly, its tiny fists clenched, flailing in the air, and the man seemed not to know what to do. He murmured words softly, trying to comfort the child, but his own anguish was evident in every movement. The girl stood motionless for a few moments, observing the strange scene. Something was wrong here. A man of that social standing wouldn't be hiding behind a tree in the middle of the highway with a baby in his arms without a very serious reason. She had learned on the streets to read people, to identify danger, and all her instincts screamed that this man was in trouble. It was then that she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold, heavy footsteps approaching, accompanied by a metallic noise that she recognized immediately. It was the sound of a blade cutting through the air, a sound she had heard in situations she preferred to forget. The man had obviously heard it too, because his entire body tensed in fear. He pressed the baby against his chest and closed his eyes tightly, as if he could make it all disappear just by willpower. His hands trembled even more, and the girl could see that he was on the verge of a total collapse. The footsteps grew closer and closer, and then she saw it. A shadowy figure emerged from the brush bordering the highway, wielding something that gleamed in the sunlight. The metallic object in his hands left no doubt about his intentions, and the girl felt her heart race. At that moment, seeing that desperate man trying to protect a helpless baby, something inside her snapped. It wasn't fair. It didn't matter who that man was or what his problems were. No one deserved to go through the terror she saw etched on his face. And definitely no baby deserved to suffer. Without thinking twice, ignoring the weakness that gripped her legs and the hunger that gnawed at her stomach, the girl ran towards the highway. Her bare feet pounded against the hot asphalt as she ran with all the strength her fragile legs could muster. The air burned her lungs, but she didn't stop. Ahead, a heavy truck approached on the highway, kicking up a cloud of dust that danced in the dry afternoon air. "Help!" cried the girl, waving her skeletal arms in the air. Her hoarse voice echoed through the valley, filled with a despair that transcended her young age. "Please, someone needs help." The truck driver, a middle-aged man with a kind face marked by years on the road, slammed on the brakes when he saw that small figure in the middle of the road. His eyes widened as he realized the child's deplorable condition, the skin clinging to the bones, the tattered clothes, the desperate look that begged for help. "What is it, little one?" he asked, quickly getting out of the cab. His voice was gentle, filled with a genuine concern that the girl had rarely encountered in her short existence. "There's a man over there." She pointed to the tree, her words tumbling out in her haste. "He has a baby, and there's someone with a shiny thing wanting to hurt them." The trucker didn't hesitate. He grabbed a piece of iron from the vehicle's body and followed the girl, who guided him with faltering but determined steps. When they arrived at the scene, the sight they found confirmed their worst fears. The assailant was just a few feet away from the man and the baby, wielding an axe with a sharp blade that reflected sunlight menacingly. His eyes were wild, filled with a rage that seemed to consume all his rationality. The handsome man cowered against the tree trunk, trying to protect the child with his own body. "Hey!" shouted the trucker, his voice echoing with authority. "Drop that weapon right now!" The man with the axe turned, surprised by the unexpected intervention. For a moment he hesitated, but soon his expression hardened again. "This is none of your business, old man. That bastard stole my son." "I didn't steal anything," protested the handsome man, his voice broken with despair. "I was just trying to protect him." The tension in the air was palpable. The trucker kept the piece of iron raised, ready to defend the innocent, while assessing the situation with the experience of someone who had witnessed many difficult scenes on the country's roads. The girl remained behind him, her large eyes watching everything with a disturbing maturity for her age. "Listen here," said the trucker, trying to remain calm. "I don't know what the story is between you two, but solving things with violence isn't going to help anyone, especially not this baby." The sound of the child's crying echoed through the air, an innocent lament that seemed to touch something deep in the axeman's heart. For an instant, his expression wavered, as if he was struggling against some internal conflict. "You don't understand," he murmured, his voice filled with a pain that the girl recognized immediately. It was the same pain she saw reflected in the faces of the adults who slept on the streets, a deep anguish that gnawed at the soul. "This is my son. She ran away with him, and now she's dead," exploded the handsome man, his tears finally overflowing. "She was running away and crashed the car. When I found the baby, he was alone, crying almost lifeless." The silence that followed was deafening. The man with the axe seemed to wither before that revelation, his face contorting in an expression of unbearable pain. The weapon in his hands trembled, and for a moment it seemed he would collapse right there. The girl watched everything with wide eyes. Even at her young age, she understood that she was witnessing something much bigger than a simple fight. It was a family tragedy, a situation where there were no villains, just people destroyed by pain and despair. "My God!" whispered the man with the axe, dropping the weapon on the ground with a metallic clang. She's gone? The handsome man nodded slowly, adjusting the baby in his arms. I was coming back from a business meeting when I saw the accident. I called the ambulance, but she didn't make it. She only managed to tell me to take care of the baby, that his father— He stopped, swallowing hard. That his father's name was Edward, completed the other man, his voice almost a whisper. My name is Edward. The revelation landed like a bomb on everyone present. The trucker lowered his makeshift weapon, realizing that the situation had taken a completely different turn. The girl approached slowly, her instincts telling her that the danger had passed. Edward looked at the baby in the stranger's arms, his son, the only thing left of the woman he loved, despite all the problems between them. His legs buckled, and he leaned on a nearby rock as if the weight of reality were too much to bear. Did she say anything else? He asked, his voice choked with emotion. The handsome man hesitated for a moment, clearly struggling with his own emotions. She said you had fought, that she was confused and scared. But before the end, she repeated your name several times. I think she regretted running away. Tears flowed freely down Edward's face as he reached out to receive his son. The baby, as if recognizing his father's presence, gradually stopped crying, his small fingers clinging to the man's shirt. Thank you, Edward murmured to the stranger. Thank you for saving him. I was so desperate that I couldn't think straight. The handsome man nodded, understanding the pain the other felt. I'm a businessman. I have resources. If you need anything for the baby— My name is Richard, said the handsome man, extending his hand. Richard Montero. I have some businesses, investments in stock market. My fortune allows me to help when needed. Edward shook the offered hand, still holding the baby carefully. I don't have much money. I work in a mechanic shop in town. But I'll give everything I have to this boy. It was then that Richard noticed the small figure who had made all this possible. The girl remained there, watching the reconciliation with eyes that seemed too old for her age. Without her inexplicable courage to ask for help, this story could have ended in tragedy. And you, said Richard, crouching down to the girl's height, you saved our lives today. The girl just blinked, not knowing how to respond to so much gratitude. She wasn't used to being seen, let alone valued for her actions. Richard studied the girl for a long moment, his business-trained eyes immediately recognizing the signs of extreme need. The tattered clothes, the skin stretched over the bones, the bare feet injured by the asphalt. Everything about her screamed abandonment and misery. But there was something more, something that intrigued him deeply. Despite all the physical fragility, her eyes shone with an intelligence and determination that he rarely saw even in adults. "What's your name?" he asked softly, remaining crouched down so as not to intimidate her. The girl hesitated, biting her lower lip. It had been so long since someone had asked her name that she had almost forgotten how important it was to have an identity. "Anna," she murmured finally, her voice weak but clear. "Anna," repeated Richard, as if testing the sound of the name. "Do you have family, someone taking care of you?" The question hit the girl like a punch in the stomach. Family. She had vague flashes of memories, a woman who smelled of alcohol and shouted a lot, strange men who appeared and disappeared from the house, cold nights sleeping on the street when things got too dangerous. But real family, the kind she saw in the movies she sometimes managed to glimpse through store windows. That was a strange concept to her. "No," she answered simply, lowering her eyes to her dirty feet. Edward, who had calmed down after the reunion with his son, watched the interaction with growing concern. "A child alone on the highway," he murmured, shaking his head. "That's not right." The trucker, who had remained silent during the reconciliation, approached the group. "I've seen many children like that on the highways," he said, his voice filled with sadness. Children of addicts, broken families, sometimes orphans that no one wanted. It's a cruel reality. Richard felt something tighten in his chest. He had built a financial empire from scratch, accumulated millions through smart investments and well-calculated deals. He had properties, imported cars, stuffed bank accounts, fund investments, and even some cryptocurrencies kept as a store of value. But none of that seemed important at that moment, in front of a child who didn't even have a pair of shoes. "Anna," he said, making a decision that would change both their lives. "Would you like to come with me? I have a big house, food, clean clothes." The girl's eyes widened, as if she couldn't process what she was hearing. "Really?" she whispered, her voice filled with a cautious hope that broke his heart. "Really?" confirmed Richard, reaching out his hand to her. "You saved my life today. It's the least I can do." Edward watched the scene with emotion, still cradling his son, who had finally fallen asleep. "It's a beautiful attitude," he said. "That girl has a heart of gold." The trucker smiled, pleased to see that this story would have a happy ending. "Well, if everything is settled here, I need to get back on the road. I have a delivery to make before nightfall." Richard got up and took a thick wallet from his pocket, taking out several bills. "At least let me pay for your fuel," he insisted. "You helped us when we needed it." The trucker hesitated, but eventually accepted the money with a grateful smile. "Thank you, sir, and good luck with the little one." He turned to Anna and winked at her. "You did a very brave thing today, girl. Never forget that." As the truck drove off down the highway, kicking up a new cloud of dust, the four remained there for a few moments, processing everything that had happened. Edward was the first to break the silence. "I should go too," he said, looking at the baby in his arms. "I need to get a crib, diapers, milk. I wasn't prepared for this." His voice carried a mixture of joy and apprehension. Having his son back was a miracle, but the responsibility of caring for a newborn alone scared him. Richard thought for a moment. "If you need financial help with the baby's things, look me up." He took a card from his pocket and handed it to Edward. "I have offices in the capital. My investments give me a considerable income. I can help without problems." Edward accepted the card with gratitude. "Thank you, really. You and that girl, you saved my family today." He looked at Anna with affection. "Take good care of her. She's special." After Edward left with his son, Richard turned to Anna, who remained standing by the side of the road, as if she still couldn't believe that someone really wanted to take her home. "Ready?" he asked gently. Anna looked at the dusty road that had been her home for so long, then at the elegant man who was offering her a new life. It was hard to believe that everything could change so quickly. Still in the morning of that day, she was alone, hungry, with no prospects at all. Now a person who seemed to have stepped out of her most impossible dreams was offering her a home. "Will I have to do anything in return?" she asked, her experience on the streets teaching her to always distrust offers that were too generous. Richard felt his heart squeeze at the question. What kind of life had this child lived to develop this distrust so early? "No," he answered firmly. "I just want you to be a child, to play, study, be happy." Anna studied him for a long moment, her large eyes trying to decipher if he was being sincere. There was something about that man that gave her security, an honesty that she had learned to recognize. Slowly, she extended her small, dirty hand and placed it in his. Richard's car was unlike anything Anna had ever seen. Black, shiny, with a leather interior that smelled of luxury. She hesitated before getting in, afraid of dirtying the expensive seats with her filthy clothes. "You can get in," encouraged Richard, noticing her hesitation. "It's just a car." During the drive to the mansion, Anna pressed her face against the window, watching the landscape gradually change. The simple houses of the outskirts gave way to more organized neighborhoods, then to a luxury residential area with tree-lined streets and high walls protecting properties that looked like small palaces. "Do you live in a house like that?" she asked, amazed. "I do," confirmed Richard. "And now you do too." When they finally arrived at the gate of the mansion, Anna simply couldn't close her mouth. The property was bigger than anything she could imagine. Perfectly manicured gardens, a fountain in the center of the courtyard, and a house that looked more like a movie hotel. "My God," she whispered. Richard watched her reaction with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. His wealth, accumulated through years of hard work and smart investments, had always been a source of pride. But seeing it through the eyes of that girl, he wondered if it wouldn't be too intimidating for her. When they got out of the car, a middle-aged woman appeared at the main door. Tall, thin, with her hair tied in a severe bun, she wore an impeccable uniform and carried an expression that seemed permanently disapproving. "Mr. Richard," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "We weren't expecting you back so soon." "Mrs. Gable," greeted Richard. "I brought a guest. This is Anna. She's going to live with us from today on." The housekeeper's eyes moved to the girl, and Anna could clearly see the shock and disapproval that spread across the woman's face. It was as if she was seeing something particularly unpleasant that someone had dragged into her perfect home. Mrs. Gable looked Anna up and down with an expression that made it clear that she considered the girl's presence a personal affront to the order and elegance of her home. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she crossed her arms defensively over her chest. "Mr. Richard," she said, choosing her words carefully, "perhaps we should talk about appropriate arrangements for the child. We have standards to maintain in this house." Richard felt a wave of irritation rise in his chest. He had known Mrs. Gable for 5 years, since she had started working as a housekeeper after the loss of his wife. The woman was efficient, kept the house running perfectly, but she was also extremely rigid in her concepts about property and social class. "The only standards that matter to me," he replied firmly, "are kindness and humanity. Anna is my guest, and I expect her to be treated as such." Anna shrank instinctively behind Richard, feeling the hostility radiating from the housekeeper like waves of heat. She was used to scornful looks. On the streets, people always treated her as if she were invisible, or worse, as if she were a plague to be avoided. But somehow, the rejection in that place that was supposed to be her new home hurt in a different way. "Of course, sir," murmured Mrs. Gable, but her tone made it clear that she did not approve of the situation in the least. "Should I prepare one of the guest rooms?" "The blue room on the 2nd floor," decided Richard. "It's warm, has good light, and is close to my room in case she needs anything during the night." Mrs. Gable nodded stiffly and withdrew, her heels clicking dryly across the marble hall. Anna watched her leave with a pit in her stomach, already sensing that her life in that house would be more complicated than Richard imagined. "Don't mind her," said Richard, placing his hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "Mrs. Gable is very attached to the routine. She'll get used to you." Anna wanted to believe those words, but her experience told her otherwise. People like Mrs. Gable didn't change their minds easily, especially about children like her. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Polished marble reflected the light from a crystal chandelier hanging from the high ceiling. Expensive paintings decorated the walls, and furniture that looked like museum antiquities occupied each room with intimidating elegance. Anna walked with extreme caution, afraid to touch anything. Her bare feet left small marks on the pristine floor, and she could see Mrs. Gable watching every step from a discreet distance, clearly cataloguing every damage that the girl's presence caused to her perfect home. "Are you hungry?" asked Richard, leading her to a dining room that could easily accommodate 20 people. Anna nodded timidly. In fact, she was starving, a hunger that went beyond an empty stomach and had settled in every cell of her skeletal body. But even so, she hesitated before sitting in the chair that Richard pulled out for her, accustomed as she was to eating scraps found in the trash or leftovers that kind people sometimes offered her. Mrs. Gable appeared at the door of the dining room with an even more severe expression. Mr. Richard, perhaps it would be appropriate for the child to clean herself before sitting at the table." The observation, although technically practical, was made with a tone that made Anna shrink even more. She looked at her dirty hands, her tattered clothes, and felt a deep shame settle in her chest. Maybe she really didn't belong in that place. Richard immediately noticed the effect of Mrs. Gable's words on the girl. "You're right," he said, but his tone was gentle when he addressed Anna. "How about we take a hot bath first? I bet it will feel good after so long on the road." The bathroom of the Blue Room was bigger than any room where Anna had ever slept. The bathtub could easily hold 3 people her size, and there were more toiletries on the shelves than she could name. Richard turned on the faucets, testing the water temperature until he found the ideal spot. "There are clean towels here," he explained, pointing to a cabinet. "And I'll ask Mrs. Gable to find some clothes that fit you." He hesitated for a moment. Do you know how to take a bath alone?" Anna nodded quickly, blushing at the question. Even living on the streets, she had always tried to keep clean when possible, using public taps or rivers when she found them. Hygiene was one of the few things that connected her to the vague memory of a previous, more normal life. When Richard left, carefully closing the door behind him, Anna was alone with the intimidating luxury of the bathroom. Slowly, she took off her tattered clothes and left them on the floor like a pile of fabrics that looked more like cleaning rags. The hot water was a revelation. It had been so long since she had felt something so comforting that she almost cried. She let herself sink into the bathtub, feeling the dirt and fatigue of months on the streets being washed from her skin. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps her life could really change. Meanwhile, downstairs, Richard faced the growing resistance of his housekeeper. "Mr. Montero," said Mrs. Gable, her voice laden with forced patience, "surely you understand that a child like that requires special care. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to find a suitable institution for her." "An institution?" Richard turned to face her, his expression hardening. "Mrs. Gable, that girl saved my life today. She is brave, intelligent, and deserves a chance. I'm not sending her anywhere." "But, sir, think about the difference in worlds. She wasn't raised for this environment. It may be difficult for her to adapt, and—" Mrs. Gable hesitated, searching for the right words. "And it may be uncomfortable for everyone involved." Richard studied his housekeeper for a long moment. Mrs. Gable had lost her own husband in a workplace accident years ago, and since then had dedicated herself entirely to housework. He knew that she was not a bad person, just someone who had become too attached to social conventions as a way of dealing with her own losses. "Mrs. Gable," he said finally, "when my wife passed away, you told me that this house needed life again. Anna brings that life. She brings purpose." The housekeeper lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the comparison. "It's not the same thing, sir." "No? An innocent person who needs care and protection seems exactly the same to me." Before Mrs. Gable could respond, they heard a scream coming from upstairs. It was Anna, and there was absolute panic in her voice. Richard took the stairs 2 at a time, Mrs. Gable right behind him. When they reached the bathroom, they found Anna still in the bathtub, but something was wrong. The water around her was tinged with red, and she was looking at her own hands with terror. "There's blood coming out!" she cried, her words punctuated by panic. "I don't know why there's blood coming out." Richard knelt beside the bathtub, trying to understand what was happening. It was then that he realized it wasn't new blood. The hot water had softened old wounds and poorly healed scars that covered the girl's fragile body, causing them to bleed again. "My God," whispered Mrs. Gable behind him, her voice losing all its previous coldness. "What did they do to this child?" Richard carefully lifted Anna out of the bathtub, wrapping her in a soft towel. She was trembling violently, not from cold, but from fear and confusion. "It's okay," he murmured, trying to calm her. "You didn't do anything wrong." We just need to take care of some boo-boos. But as he examined the marks on the girl's skeletal body, Richard felt a fury growing in his chest. Anna hadn't just lived on the streets. Someone had hurt her deliberately, repeatedly. The scars told a story no child should carry. Richard observed each mark with growing horror. Some were clearly cigarette burns, others looked like deliberate cuts, and there were bruises in various stages of healing that suggested constant and systematic violence. "Who did this to you?" he asked gently, as he dried Anna with extreme care so as not to hurt the open wounds. Anna lowered her eyes, her voice coming out as an almost inaudible whisper. "My mom's boyfriend. He would get mad when she wasn't home. He said I was a nuisance." Mrs. Gable, who was watching from the bathroom door, felt something break inside her chest. During all those years working for wealthy families, she had become accustomed to seeing only the superficial problems of the elite. Fights over inheritance, marital betrayals, spoiled children. But this was different. This was real, visceral cruelty perpetrated against a helpless child. "And your mom?" asked Richard, controlling his voice so as not to scare Anna even more. "She used stuff that made her sleep a lot," replied Anna, using the euphemisms she had learned to describe the brutal reality of her previous life. "When she woke up, she cried a lot. Then the man got even madder." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of what he had brought into his home. It wasn't just an abandoned child. It was a deeply traumatized child who would need much more than food and shelter to heal. "Mr. Montero," said Mrs. Gable softly, "we should call a doctor. Some of those wounds look infected." For the first time since they arrived, Richard heard genuine concern in his housekeeper's voice. "You're right. Dr. Ellis can come here today." While Richard made the necessary calls, Mrs. Gable stayed with Anna, helping her put on a cotton nightgown that she had found in a closet. The garment was too big for the girl's skeletal body, but it was clean and soft, a luxury Anna hadn't known for a long time. "Why is he being nice to me?" Anna asked suddenly, watching Richard through the half-open door as he spoke on the phone. Mrs. Gable hesitated, searching for the right words. "Sometimes good people exist," she said finally. "It's hard to believe when you've only known bad people, but they do. Is he going to send me away when he finds out I'm sick?" The question hit Mrs. Gable like a punch. "Sick? What do you mean, sick?" Anna looked at her own small hands, then at her thin, twig-like arms. "I don't grow right. The doctors told my mom that I have something wrong that makes me always stay small." Mrs. Gable felt her heart squeeze. It wasn't just trauma and malnutrition. Anna had a medical condition that explained her extremely fragile appearance. "What kind of thing wrong?" "I don't know the name right. I just know that's why I look like I'm 2 when I'm 4, and that it's really expensive to treat." Anna paused, looking directly into Mrs. Gable's eyes. "My mom said that's why no one would ever want me." The words echoed in the silence of the room, filled with a deep sadness that made Mrs. Gable rethink every judgment she had made since Anna arrived. This was not a spoiled or troublesome child. It was a child who had been rejected by her own medical condition, turned into a burden by those who should protect her. Dr. Ellis arrived 2 hours later, a gentle man with graying hair who had known Richard for years. He examined Anna with professional care, taking notes as he catalogued each wound and scar. "The external injuries will heal with proper care," he told Richard when they finished. "But I'm worried about other things. She is severely malnourished, and there is something in her bone structure that suggests an underlying medical condition." "She mentioned something about not growing right," informed Richard. Dr. Ellis nodded gravely. "I'll need to do some more detailed tests. It could be Turner syndrome, growth hormone deficiency, or a number of other conditions. Some are treatable. Others," he hesitated, "others require specialized and very expensive care." "Money is not a problem," said Richard immediately. "Whatever she needs." The doctor studied Richard for a moment. "Mr. Montero, Caring for a child with special medical needs is a long-term commitment. It may involve years of treatment, surgeries, therapies. Are you sure you're prepared for that? Richard looked through the door to the room where Anna was sitting on the bed, hugging a pillow as if it were a stuffed animal. She looked so small and lost in that big bed, like a broken doll that someone had abandoned. "She saved my life today," he said simply. "It's the right thing to do." In the days that followed, a new routine was established in the mansion. Anna woke up late, still recovering from the exhaustion of months living on the streets. Mrs. Gable, who had gradually abandoned her initial hostility, prepared small and frequent meals, trying to reverse years of malnutrition without overloading the girl's fragile digestive system. Richard cancelled several business meetings to stay home, personally overseeing Anna's adaptation. He watched her cautiously explore the house, always keeping a respectful distance from the expensive objects, as if she expected to be scolded at any moment. "You can touch things," he said one day, finding her admiring a bronze sculpture in the main hall. "This is your house now." "But what if I break something?" asked Anna, her small hands clasped behind her back. "Then we clean up the pieces and move on," replied Richard with a smile. "Things can be replaced. People can't." It was a revelation for Anna, the idea that she was more valuable than any material object. Throughout her life, she had been treated as something disposable, less important than the possessions of the people around her. Medical exams began the following week. Dr. Ellis had scheduled a series of appointments with specialists in the capital, and Richard arranged everything so that Anna had the best possible care. His investments in stocks and fixed income funds were finally serving something that really mattered, giving a chance of a dignified life to a child who had known only suffering. During one of the appointments, while Anna was having blood tests, Richard spoke with the pediatric endocrinologist. "Preliminary results confirm severe growth hormone deficiency," explained the doctor. "It's a treatable condition, but treatment needs to start immediately. Every day that passes without the appropriate hormone therapy is development she will never recover." "What is the cost?" asked Richard. "High, very high. We're talking about daily injections of synthetic hormone for years, constant medical monitoring, regular exams. It could easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars over the full treatment." Richard did not hesitate. "Start today." But when they returned home that afternoon, Anna was quieter than usual. During dinner, she just played with her food, her big eyes fixed on the plate. "What's wrong, little one?" asked Richard gently. Anna looked at him with an expression that seemed too old for her age. "I heard the doctor talking about how much it costs to fix me." "Fix?" Richard frowned. "Anna, you're not broken. You just need help to grow. But it costs a lot of money. A lot." Her words came out in a whisper filled with guilt. "What if you become poor because of me? What if you regret bringing me here?" The fear in her voice was so real, so visceral, that it made Richard realize the depth of the trauma she carried. Anna had learned to see herself as a financial burden, an expense that no one wanted to take on. "Anna," he said, crouching beside her chair, "I want you to listen to me carefully. I have a lot of money. More than I could spend in several lifetimes. But if I had to choose between all that money and you, I would choose you without hesitation." "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Because you reminded me of what really matters. Before today, I lived only to accumulate more wealth, more possessions. Now I have a real purpose." That night, as Anna finally fell asleep in her new bed, Richard stood watching her for a few minutes. She looked so fragile, so vulnerable, but there was an inner strength in her that he deeply admired. Tomorrow they would begin the treatment that could change her life forever. The first month of treatment was brutal for Anna. The daily injections of growth hormone caused severe headaches and nausea that left her prostrate for hours. Her body, accustomed to deprivation, reacted violently to the medication, as if it were rejecting any attempt at change. Richard watched each episode with growing anguish. On several mornings, he found Anna bent over the toilet, vomiting until there was nothing left in her already fragile stomach. Her eyes became even more sunken, and the new clothes that Mrs. Gable had bought seemed to swallow her body, which seemed to be shrinking even further. "Maybe we should lower the dosage," suggested Dr. Ellis during a follow-up consultation, worried about the girl's severe reaction to treatment. "No," said Anna weakly, but with surprising determination. "I want to get better. I don't want to be a burden forever." Mrs. Gable, who had gradually become more protective of Anna, held her small hand during medical appointments. The housekeeper had discovered that, beneath her armor of domestic efficiency, there still existed a maternal heart that had been buried under years of mourning for her own lost daughter. "She is strong," murmured Mrs. Gable to Richard when Anna fell asleep exhausted after another round of tests. "Stronger than many adults I've known, but Anna's strength would be tested in ways none of them could foresee. In the third week of treatment, during a particularly difficult morning, she fainted in the bathroom. Richard found her unconscious on the cold marble floor, her skin as pale as wax. The rush to the hospital was desperate. Anna remained unconscious throughout the journey, her breathing so weak that Richard needed to put his ear to her chest several times to make sure her heart was still beating. "Severe adverse reaction to medication," diagnosed the emergency room doctor after a series of tests. "Her body is rejecting the hormone treatment. We'll need to suspend everything and start over with a completely different approach." When Anna finally woke up, hours later, she found Richard sitting beside her hospital bed. He had run his hand through his hair so many times that it was completely disheveled, and his expensive clothes were wrinkled from so much time sitting in that uncomfortable chair. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. "Sorry for what?" asked Richard, relieved to see her conscious. "For costing so much money and not working." Anna's words hit Richard like a slap. Even sick, even having gone through yet another medical trauma, she was still worried about being a financial burden. The idea that a 4-year-old child carried that kind of guilt was devastating. "Anna, listen to me carefully," he said, holding her small hands. "You don't cost money. You're worth every penny I have. More than all my investments, more than all my properties." But Anna had learned to distrust promises from adults. "What if you get tired of trying to fix me?" The question echoed in the silence of the hospital room, filled with all the rejection she had experienced in her short life. Richard realized that healing Anna would involve much more than medication and medical treatments. It would involve healing her wounded soul. The doctors decided to try an experimental approach, a gentler treatment with smaller dosages and different medications. It would be longer, more uncertain, but potentially less traumatic for Anna's fragile system. "It's a new protocol," explained the endocrinologist. "We are still collecting data on its effectiveness, but preliminary results are promising. The only problem is that it may take twice as long to see results." "Time is not a problem," replied Richard. "What matters is that she recovers without suffering." During her recovery in the hospital, something unexpected happened. Anna started drawing. A nurse had left paper and crayons to entertain her, and she discovered a form of expression she didn't know before. Her first drawings were dark, small figures in large houses, people alone in empty rooms. But gradually, more vibrant colors began to appear. She drew Richard with a smile. Mrs. Gable cooking in the kitchen, herself playing in the mansion's garden. "She's processing trauma through art," observed the child psychologist who'd been called in to evaluate Anna. "It's a positive sign. It shows that she's starting to believe she can have a different future." When they finally returned home, a new routine was established. Medical treatment continued, but more gradually. Anna took her medications with fewer side effects and slowly began to gain weight and energy. Mrs. Gable became her constant companion, teaching her basic things that a 4-year-old should know: how to brush her teeth right, how to comb her hair, how to behave at the table. But she did everything with infinite patience, as if she were recovering lost years of motherhood. "Why did you change your mind about me?" Anna asked one day, as Mrs. Gable helped her choose clothes to wear. The housekeeper stopped what she was doing, considering the question carefully. "Because I realized I was scared." "Scared of me?" "Afraid of caring about you, and then you going away, just like my daughter went away a long time ago." Anna studied the older woman's face, seeing for the first time the deep sadness that Mrs. Gable carried. "Did your daughter die?" "She did. In an accident. She was your age." The revelation created an unexpected bond between them. Anna, who had lost her childhood to violence and neglect, and Mrs. Gable, who had lost the chance to be a mother to tragedy. Two wounded souls finding healing in each other, but not everything was resolved. 3 months after the start of the modified treatment, Richard received a call that would change everything again. It was from a private investigator he had hired to investigate Anna's past, hoping to find any relatives who could provide important medical information. "Mr. Montero, I found the girl's mother." Richard felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean, found? I thought she didn't die. She's in a rehab clinic in the capital. Apparently she got rid of her addiction and wants her daughter back." The news fell on Richard like a bomb. During all those months, he had assumed that Anna was an orphan, that there was no one in the world who could claim her. The idea that her biological mother might show up and take her away was a nightmare he hadn't considered. "Does she have legal rights?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "She does. Unless it can be proven that she is unfit as a mother, the law favors family reunification." That night, Richard stayed awake late, watching Anna sleep peacefully in her bed. She had started smiling more, laughing at the antics he did during dinner, asking about his companies and investments with childlike curiosity. She had become part of his life in a way he had never imagined possible. How could he explain to her that the woman who had abandoned her and allowed her to be tortured now wanted to take her back? How could he protect her from another trauma without becoming the kind of person who separates a child from her biological mother? As he processed these impossible questions, Richard made a decision that would define the next months of their lives. No matter what it cost, in money, in legal battles, in personal sacrifices, he would fight to keep Anna safe. She had saved his life that day on the highway, and now it was his turn to save her. But first, he would need to tell Anna that her mother was alive, and that conversation could destroy all the trust and stability they had built together in recent months. Richard spent 3 days trying to find the courage to have that conversation with Anna. He watched her play in the garden, drawing birds in her notebooks, laughing at Mrs. Gable's jokes during lunch, and felt his heart squeeze with the certainty that he was about to destroy that fragile peace they had built. The opportunity arose on a Sunday afternoon, when Anna was sitting in the library, leafing through a book of fairy tales. She had developed a habit of reading the stories through the illustrations, inventing dialogues for the characters with a creativity that impressed Richard. "Anna," he said, sitting beside her on the large armchair, "I need to talk to you about something important." Something in the tone of his voice made Anna close the book immediately. She had learned to identify the signs of serious conversations, and they usually didn't bring good news for her. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked automatically, her voice becoming small. No, you didn't do anything wrong." Richard took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Remember when you told me about your mum, about how she would sleep a lot and then cry?" Anna nodded slowly, her expression closing up, as it always did when the past was mentioned. "Well, I found out that she didn't die like we thought. She's alive, Anna, and she's in a clinic trying to get better." The silence that followed was deafening. Anna fixed her eyes on her small hands, processing the information in a way that seemed too slow for a 4-year-old. "Does she want to see me?" she asked finally, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes. In fact, she wants you to come live with her again." The words came out like a death sentence. Anna looked up at Richard, and he could see the pure terror stamped on her dilated pupils. It was the same fear he had seen in her when he found her in the hospital, when the old wounds had opened during the bath. "But I don't want to go," she said, her voice starting to tremble. "I want to stay here with you and Mrs. Gable. No one hurts me here." Richard felt his heart shatter. "I know, little one. I want you to stay too. But when a mother gets better, the law says she has the right to have her children back, even if the daughter doesn't want to." The innocent question hit Richard like a blade. How to explain the complexities of the legal system to a 4-year-old? How to make her understand that what was technically correct wasn't always what was best for her? "I'm trying to find a way for you to stay here," he promised. "I have lawyers working on it. But Anna, there's a possibility that you may have to go see her, at least." Anna shrank back into the armchair, hugging the book against her chest as if it were a shield. "What if she takes me away and her boyfriend is still there? What if he starts hurting me again?" "That won't happen. I promise." "You can't promise that," said Anna with a devastating wisdom. "You weren't there before." The accusation, although made without malice, hit Richard deeply. She was right. He hadn't been there when she needed protection. And maybe he wouldn't be able to be there in the future either. That night, Anna had her first nightmare since arriving at the mansion. She woke up screaming, calling for Richard between sobs that echoed through the halls. When he reached the room, he found her huddled in the corner of the bed, trembling violently. "I dreamed that he was burning me again," she cried, throwing herself into Richard's arms. "And you couldn't find me." Richard held her against his chest, feeling her tears wetting his shirt. "It was just a nightmare. I'm here. I'll always be here." But even as he spoke the words, he knew he couldn't guarantee it. The legal reality was implacable. A biological mother who had completed rehab would take precedence over a stranger, no matter how much he loved Anna. The next morning, Richard received a call from his lead attorney, Dr. Holden Adler, a man who had made a fortune defending difficult child custody cases. "Richard, I need to be direct with you," the lawyer said. "The girl's mother has a strong case. She has completed a 6-month rehabilitation program, has favorable psychological reports, and is living in a supervised assisted living facility with medical oversight. From a legal standpoint, she has demonstrated genuine change." "And Anna? Doesn't what she's been through count for anything?" "It does, but the judicial system favors family reunification whenever possible. Unless we can prove that the mother still poses a danger to the child." "What would we need for that, doctor?" Adler sighed. "Evidence that she's still using substances, or that she's maintaining contact with dangerous people from her past, or that she doesn't have the financial means to care for a child with special medical needs. But Richard, I have to warn you, hiring investigators to tail a woman in recovery can look like legal harassment." Richard hung up the phone with more questions than answers. His investments in Bitcoin and stocks gave him almost unlimited financial resources, but they couldn't buy what he really wanted, the certainty that Anna would be safe. During lunch, Mrs. Gable noticed that both Richard and Anna were unusually quiet. The housekeeper had become an expert at reading the moods of the house, especially after Anna had become the emotional center of their lives. "Did something happen?" she asked while serving the soup that Anna was just pushing around the plate. Richard and Anna exchanged a loaded glance. Finally, it was Anna who spoke. "My real mom wants to take me away." Mrs. Gable almost dropped the pot she was holding. During all those months, she had assumed that Anna was an orphan, that there was no one in the world who could claim her. The idea of losing her was unbearable. "What does that mean?" she asked, looking at Richard. "It means we may have a legal fight ahead of us," he replied, "and that we need to prepare ourselves for the possibility that Anna might have to leave." "No," said Mrs. Gable with surprising firmness. We're not going to let that happen." Anna looked at the woman who had become her maternal figure, seeing for the first time the protective ferocity that Mrs. Gable had developed for her. It was comforting to know that she was not alone in that fight, but also frightening to realize that the adults she had learned to trust were as lost as she was. 3 days later, the first legal battle officially began. Anna's biological mother, through her own lawyers, filed a formal request for the return of custody. Richard received the papers at his mansion, and the reality of the situation became inescapable. "We have 30 days to respond," explained Dr. Adler during a meeting in his office. "I will argue that Anna is settled in a stable home, that she is receiving essential medical treatment, and that an abrupt change would be detrimental to her mental and physical health. And the chances? 50% at best. The judge may determine supervised visits as a first step to assess the dynamic between mother and daughter." The idea of Anna having to meet the woman who had allowed her to be tortured made Richard feel nauseous. But he knew he had no choice. The legal system would run its course, regardless of his feelings. That night, Anna asked a question that caught him completely off guard. "If I tell the judge about the bad things that happened to me, will he let me stay with you?" Richard watched her for a long moment. It was a question asked with the desperate hope of a child, but which carried devastating implications. Making Anna relive her traumas in a courtroom would be almost as cruel as sending her back to the situation that had hurt her. "I don't know, little one, but I promise I'll fight for you with everything I have." Anna nodded, but Richard could see that his words had not brought the comfort she needed. In fact, for the first time since arriving at the mansion, she seemed to be losing hope that things could work out. The first court hearing was scheduled for a rainy winter Thursday. Richard woke up early, as nervous as he had ever been, even during his biggest financial transactions. His investments in real estate funds and treasury bonds had taught him how to deal with risk, but never a risk that involved the well-being of someone he loved. Anna had spent the night in Richard's room, huddled between him and Mrs. Gable after another nightmare. She woke up pale and quiet, refusing the breakfast that Mrs. Gable had prepared, especially to give her courage. "I can't eat," she murmured, pushing the plate away. "My tummy hurts." Mrs. Gable knelt beside Anna's chair, her gentle hands smoothing the girl's hair, which had grown a little in recent weeks thanks to treatment. "It's just nerves, darling. After it's over, it will pass. What if the judge says I have to leave today?" The question echoed through the silence of the kitchen like a funeral bell. It was the possibility that everyone feared but no one had verbalized. Richard forced a smile, trying to convey a confidence he didn't feel. "That's not going to happen." Dr. Adler said that at most the judge would order supervised visits first. But when they arrived at the courthouse, Richard realized he had underestimated the situation. Anna's biological mother was there, accompanied by 2 lawyers and a social worker. She looked different, cleaner, more sober, wearing simple but appropriate clothes. But what impressed Richard the most was the physical resemblance between her and Anna. The woman's name was Sarah, she was about 25 years old, and her big eyes were identical to her daughter's. When she saw Anna, her face lit up with a mixture of joy and regret that was undeniably genuine. "Anna?" she called softly, taking a step towards the girl. Anna hid behind Richard's legs, grabbing the fabric of his pants tightly. Her breathing had quickened, and Richard could feel the tremor that gripped her small body. "It's okay," he whispered to Anna. "You don't have to talk to her if you don't want to." Sarah's lawyer, a young man with a combative air, watched the interaction with obvious interest. "Your Honor," he said to the judge when the hearing finally began, "as you can see, parental alienation is already established. The child has clearly been conditioned to reject her biological mother." Dr. Adler stood up immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. There is no parental alienation here. The child is manifesting natural trauma related to the abandonment and abuse she suffered before being rescued by my client. The judge, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, studied the papers before him. "Mr. Richard Montero," he said, "I understand that you took in the minor after finding her in a state of abandonment. Can you explain the circumstances?" Richard stood up, Anna still clinging to his legs. "Your Honor, I found Anna alone on the highway, in a state of severe malnutrition and with injuries that indicated systematic abuse. She helped me in a dangerous situation, and I decided to reciprocate by offering her a safe home. And Ms. Sarah," the judge addressed the biological mother, "can you explain how your daughter got into that situation?" Sarah stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I was sick, addicted. I couldn't take care of Anna as she deserved. My boyfriend at the time was violent, and I was too blind to protect her." Her voice broke. "I know I failed her, but now I've been clean for 8 months. I've completed rehab, I have psychological counseling, and I just want a chance to be the mother she deserves." Anna, who had been quiet until then, suddenly spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He would burn me with cigarettes when you were sleeping." The silence that followed was devastating. Sarah covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. The judge made careful notes while the lawyers exchanged meaningful glances. "Anna," said the judge gently, "can you tell me more about that?" Anna looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. "He said I was guilty because Mommy used the bad stuff. When she didn't wake up, he would get mad at me. Sometimes he locked me in the closet. Sometimes," she hesitated, looking at Sarah, "sometimes he hurt me with hot things." Sarah burst into tears. "I didn't know. When I was using, I couldn't—" "Oh God, Anna, forgive me." Dr. Adler seized the moment. "Your Honor, as you can see, this child has been severely traumatized. She is now in a stable home, receiving specialized medical treatment for a rare health condition and developing healthy bonds with appropriate parental figures. My client is willing to pay for any necessary treatment," added Sarah's lawyer, "and there are government programs available for families in recovery." The judge studied Anna for a long moment. "Anna, do you understand that this lady is your mother?" Anna nodded slowly. "I remember her. She sang to me sometimes when she wasn't sleeping. And would you like to spend some time with her?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Anna looked at Sarah, then at Richard, then at Mrs. Gable, who was sitting in the front row with tears in her eyes. "Will she take me away from Richard?" asked Anna. "That's what we're here to decide," answered the judge patiently. Anna was quiet for so long that everyone began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, she spoke. "Can I get to know her better first, before I decide?" The judge nodded. "That seems sensible to me. I'm going to determine supervised visits, twice a week, for a period of 2 months. After that period, we will reassess the situation." Richard felt a mixture of relief and panic. Twice a week didn't seem like much, but he knew it would be torturous for Anna. And what would happen after 2 months was a terrifying unknown. When they left the courthouse, Sarah approached them in the parking lot. "Richard," she said, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Anna hid behind Mrs. Gable while Richard spoke with Sarah. The woman seemed genuinely remorseful, but also desperately determined to get her daughter back. "I know you must hate me," she said, "but Anna is all I have left. She's the only good thing I've ever done in my life. I need a chance to prove that I've changed." "And if Anna decides she doesn't want to come back to you?" asked Richard directly. Sarah hesitated. Then I'll accept it. But first, I want her to really know me. The mother I am now, not the one I was before." On the way back home, Anna remained silent, processing everything that had happened. It was only when they arrived at the mansion that she finally spoke. "Mrs. Gable, do you think my mum really changed?" Mrs. Gable, who had held back her emotion throughout the hearing, finally allowed a few tears to escape. "I don't know, darling, but I know that people can change if they really want to. And do you think she really wants to be my mum, or just feels guilty?" The question demonstrated a disturbing emotional maturity for a 4-year-old. Mrs. Gable and Richard exchanged a look, both realizing that Anna had learned to question the motivations of adults in a way that no child should need to. "I think we'll only find that out with time," replied Richard honestly. That night, as Anna finally fell asleep after another traumatic day, Richard made a decision that would change his approach to the entire situation. If Anna was going to have to meet her biological mother anyway, he would do everything in his power to ensure that it was under the best possible conditions. Using his considerable financial resources, he hired the best child psychologists available to monitor the visits. He also decided to discreetly investigate Sarah's current situation, not to harm her, but to make sure she was really clean and fit to care for Anna. The first supervised visit was scheduled for the following week, and Richard knew it would be one of the most difficult days of Anna's life. All he could do was be there to support her, no matter what the outcome. The first supervised visit took place in a neutral room at the city's social services center. Anna held Richard's hand tightly, her big eyes watching every detail of the environment, as if she were looking for possible escape routes. Mrs. Gable had insisted on accompanying them, carrying a bag with snacks and toys that Anna liked. Sarah arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time, clearly nervous. Her hands trembled as she rummaged through a small bag, taking out and putting objects back without needing to. When she saw Anna enter the room, her face lit up with a mixture of joy and painful nostalgia. "Hi, Anna," she said softly, keeping her distance as instructed by the social worker. You've grown." Anna remained glued to Richard's side, watching Sarah with cautious curiosity. It was strange to see her mother sober, clean, speaking in a clear voice. Her fragmented memories of the woman mainly included drowsiness, tears, and confusion. "I brought some things for you," Sarah continued, taking small objects from the bag. "Remember this teddy bear? It was your favorite when you were a baby." The stuffed toy was faded and patched, but still recognizable. Anna looked at it for a long moment, some vague memories stirring in her mind. Nights when Sarah could still be a mother, lullabies sung in a choked but affectionate voice. "Can I take it?" asked Anna timidly. "Of course you can. It's yours." Anna let go of Richard's hand slowly and approached Sarah. When she took the teddy bear, she smelled a familiar scent that transported her to times she had almost forgotten. It was the cheap perfume that Sarah used to wear, mixed with the scent of baby soap. "Do you remember him?" asked Sarah, hopeful. "A little," admitted Anna. "You used to sing a song about him." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I did." "Do you want me to sing it again?" Anna nodded hesitantly, and Sarah began to hum a simple melody about a teddy bear that protected a girl during the night. Her voice was steadier now, without the tremor that Anna remembered from the times when she used substances. During the next 45 minutes, mother and daughter interacted cautiously, building fragile bridges over the abyss of pain that separated them. Sarah showed old photos. Anna as a baby, first steps, birthdays that happened before her life completely fell apart. "Do you remember your second birthday?" asked Sarah, showing a photo of Anna blowing out candles on a small but elaborately decorated cake. Anna studied the image. "Were there a lot of people?" "It was just the two of us, but we had a beautiful party, just us." Sarah paused, her voice becoming heavier. "Before things got bad, why did you start using the things that made you sleep so much?" asked Anna, with the brutal honesty of children. The question hit Sarah like a punch. She looked at Richard, then at the social worker, seeking guidance on how to answer such a complex question for a 4-year-old. "Because I was very sad," she said finally, "and I didn't know how to deal with the sadness. So I used things that I thought would make me feel better, but they actually made me feel worse." "And now you're not sad anymore?" I still get sad sometimes, but I've learned better ways to deal with it. I talk to people who help me. I take medicine that the doctor gave me, and mostly," she hesitated, "mostly I think about you, about how I want to be a better mum to you." Anna processed this in silence, hugging the teddy bear against her chest. "Does the man who hurt me still live with you?" "No, never again. He's gone, Anna, very far away, and I promise I will never let anyone hurt you again." "How can you promise that if you couldn't protect me before?" The question echoed through the room like a cry of pain. Sarah covered her face with her hands, struggling against sobs that threatened to explode. Richard felt his heart squeeze, seeing both Sarah's pain and Anna's need to understand why she had been abandoned. "Because now I'm strong," replied Sarah when she managed to control herself. "Before I was sick, and when people are sick in their mind, sometimes they can't protect even themselves. But now I have help. I have doctors, I have a safe place to live, and mostly, I know how important you are." When the visit ended, Anna was emotionally exhausted. In the car, she remained quiet for a long time, processing everything she had experienced. "How did you feel?" asked Richard gently. "Confused," replied Anna honestly. "She seems different, but I still remember the bad things." "It's normal to feel confused," said Mrs. Gable from the back seat. "Your feelings don't need to be simple or perfect." During the following week, Anna spoke little about the visit. Her nightmares returned, but now they were different. Instead of just terror, there was also confusion. She dreamed of Sarah singing, but also of her disappearing again. The second visit was more relaxed. Anna took some of her drawings to show Sarah, who was impressed with her daughter's artistic talent. "You always liked to draw," commented Sarah. "Even when you were little, you used to scribble on the walls." "Mrs. Gable taught me to draw better," said Anna, showing a drawing of the mansion with all the people who were now part of her life. Sarah studied the drawing, noting how Anna had placed herself in the center, surrounded by smiling figures who clearly represented Richard and Mrs. Gable. "Do they take good care of you?" "Very good. Richard takes me to the doctor so I can grow right, and Mrs. Gable teaches me things and makes tasty food." "And are you happy with them?" Anna nodded vigorously. "Very happy. No one hurts me there." The answer was like a knife in Sarah's heart, but she forced a smile. "I'm glad you're safe and happy." It was during the third visit that something unexpected happened. Anna, who had gradually become more comfortable with Sarah, suddenly asked, "Do you really want me to come live with you?" Sarah hesitated, realizing that this was a crucial question that would define everything. "I want to very much, Anna. More than anything in the world, even knowing that I need expensive medicine and special doctors." The question revealed one of Anna's biggest concerns, becoming a financial burden again. Sarah knelt in front of her daughter, holding her small hands. "Anna, you are not a burden. You never were. And about money," she paused, clearly struggling with something. "Maybe I don't have as much money as Richard, but I'll find a way. There are government programs, I can work more, But what if you get stressed and start using the bad stuff again?" The question demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of the dynamics of addiction that no 4-year-old should have. Sarah realized that Anna had learned to connect financial stress with relapse because she had lived that experience. "I'm not going to start using again," promised Sarah. "I have a plan, I have support, and mostly I have you to remind me of what's important." But Anna didn't seem convinced. "Richard said that money is not a problem for him, that he has plenty saved in banks and investments, and that even if he spent it all on me, he would still want me." The comparison was devastating. Sarah stood up, walking to the window of the room. For a moment, Richard thought she was going to explode with frustration or jealousy. But when she turned around, there was an expression of painful resolution on her face. "Anna," she said, "can I ask you a question?" "You can." "If you could choose, where would you like to live?" The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Anna looked at Richard, then at Sarah, and finally at her own feet. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course you can, darling. It's a very important decision." When they left that visit, Richard realized that something fundamental had changed. Sarah was no longer just fighting to get Anna back. She was genuinely considering what would be best for her daughter, even if it meant giving up her own desires. That night, Anna made a statement that surprised everyone. "I think my mom really changed, but I'm still scared." "Scared of what?" asked Mrs. Gable. "Scared that if I go live with her, she'll get sick again. And scared that if I don't go, she'll be sad forever." Richard realized that Anna was carrying an emotional weight that was impossible for a child, the responsibility for her biological mother's happiness, and that could influence her decision in ways that were neither fair nor healthy. The fourth visit brought a revelation that would change everything. Sarah arrived with a different expression, heavier, as if she were carrying a secret that she was finally ready to share. Anna immediately noticed the change in her mother's mood and was more cautious than usual. "Anna," said Sarah after the initial greetings, "I need to tell you something about your father." Richard straightened up in his chair, immediately alert. During all those months, the issue of Anna's paternity had never been discussed. He had assumed that the father was unknown or was out of the picture a long time ago. "My father?" asked Anna, her voice small. "I have a father." "You do? And he doesn't know you exist." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Richard felt a pang of something he couldn't identify: jealousy, fear. The possibility that there was someone else with legal rights over Anna was terrifying. "Why doesn't he know?" asked Anna with the honest curiosity of children. Sarah took a deep breath, clearly struggling with painful memories. "Because when I found out I was pregnant with you, he had left town. I tried to find him, but I couldn't. And then—" she hesitated. "Then things got very bad in my life, and I stopped looking." "Is he a good person?" asked Anna. "He was. Very good. Gentle, hard-working, always treated me well. If I had managed to tell him about you—" Sarah paused, tears welling up in her eyes. "Maybe our life would have been different." Richard felt the ground shift under his feet. The idea that Anna could have not only a biological mother, but also a father who could claim her, was devastating. His investments in cryptocurrencies and financial assets gave him material security, but they couldn't protect him against biological and legal reality. "Where is he now?" asked the social worker, making careful notes. "I don't know for sure, but I have some information. I thought maybe it was time to try to find him." Anna absorbed this information with the same seriousness with which she had processed everything else in her complicated life. "If we find him, will it mean another person wanting me to live with them?" The question hit the heart of the matter with surgical precision. Sarah realized she might have further complicated an already delicate situation for her daughter. "I don't know, honey. But I think you have the right to meet him if you want to." "I do," Anna said after a moment's thought. "But I'm also scared." When they left the visit that afternoon, Richard was visibly shaken. In the car, he remained quiet, while Margaret tried to chat normally with Anna about other things. But Anna, with her sharp sensitivity, picked up on the somber mood. "Richard, are you mad that I might have a dad now too?" The direct question forced him to confront his own feelings. "I'm not mad, Anna. I'm worried. Worried he'll want me and you'll have to share me." Anna's emotional maturity continued to impress and break Richard's heart. "Worried you might have to make decisions that are too hard for someone your age. But I can like more than one person, right? Like I like you and Margaret, and now I'm starting to like my mom again, even though I'm scared of her." Margaret turned around from the front seat, tears in her eyes. "Of course you can, sweetie. There's no limit to love." That night, Richard stayed up late, wrestling with feelings he hadn't experienced since the loss of his wife: fear of abandonment, insecurity about his role in Anna's life, and mainly, the growing certainty that he might not be able to give her what she really needed, a reunited biological family. 3 days later, Sarah called with news. "I found Edgar," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Anna's father. He's living about 2 hours from here, working as a mechanic. And Richard, when I told him about Anna, he cried." The call hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Edgar. The name echoed in his mind, bringing back memories of an encounter he had almost forgotten. Edgar, the desperate man with the hatchet, who had been reunited with his own baby that fateful day on the highway. "Edgar who?" Richard asked, already suspecting the answer. "Edgar Silver." "Why?" Richard closed his eyes, realizing that fate had crafted a cruel irony. The man he had helped reunite with his son was the father of the child he now loved as his own daughter. "I know him," Richard said simply. "What do you mean you know him?" "It's a long story. When are you planning to introduce him to Anna?" "He wants to come this weekend. Said he could bring his son too, so Anna can meet her half-brother." The information hit Richard like an avalanche. Not only did Anna have a biological father, but also a half-brother. The family she never knew she had was quickly materializing, and each new revelation made it less likely that she would stay with him. The following Saturday, Edgar arrived at the living room carrying a baby, who was now almost 6 months old. When he saw Richard, his eyes widened in surprise. "Richard, what are you doing here?" "Edgar," Richard greeted, his voice controlled despite the emotional storm he felt. "Anna is the little girl who helped me that day on the highway." Edgar looked from Richard to Anna, then back to Richard, clearly trying to process the impossible coincidence. "The little girl who saved our lives is my daughter." Anna watched the interaction between the two men with fascination. "You guys know each other?" "Your dad helped me save your half-brother," Richard explained, pointing to the baby in Edgar's arms. "This is my brother?" Anna asked, cautiously approaching to observe the baby. "Yes, he is," Edgar replied, his voice thick with emotion. "His name is Wyatt." Anna extended a small finger, which Wyatt instinctively grabbed. The smile that spread across her face was the first genuinely happy one Richard had seen in weeks. "He's tiny," she said, enchanted. "Can I hold him?" Edgar looked at Richard, a silent question in his eyes. Richard nodded, realizing he couldn't deny Anna the right to meet her biological family, no matter how much it hurt him. When Anna held Wyatt for the first time, something magical happened. The baby stopped crying and stared at her curiously, as if recognizing some familial connection. Anna began to hum softly, the same song that Sarah had sung to her during their first visit. "Wow," Edgar whispered. "It's like they know each other." "Siblings have a special connection," commented Mrs. Gable, making her usual notes. During the next 2 hours, Anna divided her attention between getting to know Edgar and playing with Wyatt. Edgar proved to be exactly as Sarah had described, gentle, patient, clearly thrilled to discover he had a daughter. "Why didn't you ever look for my mum?" Anna asked in a moment of childlike curiosity. Edgar exchanged a glance with Sarah. "Because I didn't know you existed, Princess. If I had, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you both. And now that you know, now I want to be the best dad I can be for you." The words echoed through the room as a promise, but also as a threat to Richard's ears. Edgar wasn't just discovering he had a daughter. He was reclaiming his place as her father. When the visit ended, Edgar approached Richard in the parking lot. "Thank you," he said, "for taking care of her when I couldn't." "You're welcome," Richard replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You love her, don't you?" The direct question forced Richard to confront his feelings. "Like she's my own daughter." Edgar nodded, understanding. "She was lucky to find you, but now she has a biological family that wants to do things right." "And what does that mean?" "It means Sandra and I are going to talk about giving Anna what she deserves, a united family." As he drove home, Richard realized his greatest battle was yet to come. Anna was no longer just choosing between him and Sarah. Now there was Edgar, Wyatt, and the possibility of a complete biological family that he could never compete to offer. The following week was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for everyone involved. Sarah and Edgar began meeting regularly, not just to coordinate visits with Anna, but to rebuild a connection that had been interrupted 5 years ago. Richard watched these developments with increasing anxiety, realizing he was losing Anna to something he could never offer, a reunited biological family. Anna, in turn, was visibly confused by the whole situation. During dinner at the mansion, she asked questions that broke Richard's heart. "If I go live with my mom and dad, does that mean you won't be important in my life anymore?" she asked, playing with the food on her plate. Richard struggled to find an answer that was honest, but wouldn't scare her even more. "I'll always be important in your life, Anna. People who love each other don't stop loving each other just because they live in different houses. But it won't be the same, right?" "No," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "It won't be the same." Margaret, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, suddenly got up from the table and left the room. Richard found her in the kitchen, silently crying as she washed dishes that were already clean. "I can't lose her too," Margaret said, her voice broken with emotion. "First my daughter, now Anna. I can't." Richard hugged his housekeeper, feeling that both were drowning in the same pain. "Maybe we can still find a way." "No, Richard. They're her parents. They have rights that we'll never have." The conversation was interrupted by Anna, who appeared in the kitchen with a worried expression. "Why is Margaret crying?" Margaret quickly wiped away her tears and forced a smile. "They're onion tears, honey. I was cutting onions for tomorrow's dinner." Anna studied her for a moment, clearly unconvinced, but chose not to question the obvious lie. 2 days later, Dr. Adler called with news that further complicated the situation. "Richard, Edgar has filed a petition for paternity recognition and a claim for shared custody with Sarah." "What does that mean?" Richard asked, even though he already knew the answer. "It means we now have 2 biological parents united seeking custody of Anna. Our legal position just got a lot weaker." "And Anna? Doesn't what she wants count for anything?" "It does, but she's 4 years old. The court will consider her opinion, but the weight will be limited. And Richard, there's something else. Edgar is claiming he can provide adequate medical care for Anna through the health insurance plan at the company where he works." The last piece of information felt like a stab in the back. One of the main advantages Richard had was his financial ability to afford Anna's specialized medical treatment. If Edgar could offer adequate medical care, that advantage disappeared. "When's the next hearing?" "In 2 weeks, and Richard, I need to be honest with you, unless something dramatic happens, we're probably going to lose." Richard hung up the phone with the feeling that the world was collapsing around him. His investments in real estate funds, treasury bonds and stocks gave him financial security, but they couldn't buy what he really wanted: the right to keep Anna in his life. The next day, during the supervised visit, Anna made an observation that surprised everyone. "You 3 look sad whenever you're together," she said, looking from Richard to Sarah and then to Edgar. "Why do you think that?" Sarah asked. "Because everyone's always talking in hushed voices and making worried faces when they think I'm not looking." Edgar knelt down in front of Anna. "We're sad because we want what's best for you, but we don't know what the right decision is." "The right decision about what?" "About where you should live, who you should stay with." Anna processed this for a moment. "What if I didn't want to choose? What if I wanted to stay with everyone?" The innocent question exposed the impossibility of the situation. Richard saw Sarah and Edgar exchange a meaningful look and realized they were reaching some kind of agreement between themselves. "Anna," Sarah said gently, "sometimes in life we have to make tough choices, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always love you." "Me too," Edgar added, "and I'm sure Richard feels the same." Richard nodded, unable to speak because of the lump in his throat. That night, Anna did something she hadn't done in weeks. She had a terrible nightmare. She woke up screaming, calling for all the important adults in her life at the same time. "Richard! Margaret! Mum Sarah! Dad Edgar!" When Richard arrived at the room, he found Anna trembling violently. "I dreamed you were fighting over me, and I got lost. No one could find me." Richard held her close, feeling her tears soak his shirt. "No one will let you get lost, Anna. I promise. But you'll have to fight in court, right? The lawyer said there was going to be a hearing." Richard realized Anna had overheard more adult conversations than they imagined. "Maybe. But remember you said you wanted to stay with everyone?" "Yeah. Well, maybe we can find a way to make that happen." "How?" Richard didn't have an answer to that question, but somehow the words came out of his mouth. Sometimes adults can find creative solutions when they work together instead of against each other. The next morning, Richard made a decision that would surprise everyone. He called Sarah and asked to schedule a meeting, not just with her, but also with Edgar. No lawyers, no social workers, just the three adults who loved Anna and wanted what was best for her. They met at a neutral coffee shop, far from the courts and legal formalities. The initial tension was palpable, but gradually gave way to an honest conversation about Anna's future. "I'll be direct," Richard said. "Anna loves you both, but she also loves me and Margaret. Forcing her to choose is making her suffer." "I agree," Edgar said. "But what's the alternative? She can't live in 3 houses." "She can," Sarah said suddenly, surprising both men. "There are shared custody arrangements that involve multiple residences." "What are you suggesting?" Richard asked. Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. "Edgar and I have talked a lot this week. We've decided to try a real reconciliation, slowly, with therapy, without pressure. If it works out, Anna would have a united biological family. But we also recognize that you and Margaret are essential to her happiness now." Edgar nodded. "We were thinking of something like rotating custody. Anna would spend some days of the week with us, others with you, at least until she's older and can decide for herself." Richard remained silent for a long moment, processing the proposal. It was more than he had dared to hope for, but also less than he secretly desired. "What about medical treatment?" he asked. "We split the costs," Edgar replied. "I have a good health insurance plan at work, but I know some of the experimental treatments she may need are expensive. I can contribute what I can, and you cover the rest." "And if our reconciliation doesn't work out?" Sarah asked. "If Edgar and I find that we can't form a family?" "Then we reassess," Edgar said. "The important thing is that Anna always has stability, even if we can't have it." Richard looked at Anna's 2 biological parents, seeing in them a genuine determination to put their daughter's needs above their own desires. It was more emotional maturity than he had expected. "There's one condition," Richard said finally. "Anna can't be used as a mediator between you two. If you decide to try a reconciliation, you get proper couples therapy. She's been through enough trauma without having to carry the weight of your relationship." Sarah and Edgar agreed immediately. "So, shall we try?" Sandra asked. "Let's present this to Anna and see what she thinks." Richard agreed. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a way to keep Anna in his life without destroying her chances of having a reunited biological family. It was a complicated and unprecedented arrangement, but if it worked, everyone could be happy. Now all that remained was to convince a judge that this unconventional solution would truly be the best for a 4-year-old girl who had touched the lives of all of them in unexpected ways. The second court hearing was scheduled for a rainy Friday. This time, all the adults involved arrived together, a spectacle that clearly confused the court staff who were used to litigating parties arriving separately and with mutual hostility. Anna walked in the middle of the group, holding Richard's hand with one of hers and Sarah's with the other, while Edgar carried Wyatt in his arms. To outside observers, they looked like a harmonious extended family, not people disputing the custody of a child in court. The judge, the same middle-aged man from the previous hearing, studied the group with obvious curiosity when they all sat on the same side of the room. "Well," he said, consulting his papers, "this is an unusual situation. I understand you have reached an agreement between the parties?" Dr. Adler stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. The parties propose an unconventional shared custody arrangement that we believe is in the best interest of the minor." "Explain this arrangement to me." Edgar stood up, nervous but determined. "Your Honor, we recognize that Anna has developed deep family bonds with Mr. Richard and his housekeeper Margaret. At the same time, Sarah and I want to exercise our rights and responsibilities as biological parents. We propose that Anna divide her time between our residences." "And how exactly would that work on a day-to-day basis?" It was Richard who answered. "Anna would spend 4 days a week with us, 3 days with Sarah and Edgar. All medical treatments would be coordinated between us, with costs divided proportionally. Important decisions about education and health would be made jointly." The judge frowned. "This type of arrangement is highly unusual. We usually see shared custody between 2 parents, not between 3 family entities." "Your Honor," Sarah interjected, "our situation is also unusual. Anna has suffered severe trauma. She has been rescued and cared for by people who have become her family. Forcing her to choose would be traumatic. We prefer that she maintain all the relationships that bring her stability." The judge turned to Anna, who was sitting quietly among all these adults discussing her future. "Anna, do you understand what we're talking about here?" "Yes," she replied in her small but clear voice. "You're deciding where I'm going to live. And what do you think of this proposal? Of spending some days with Mr. Richard and some days with your parents?" Anna looked at each important adult in her life before answering. "I think it would be good, because I love them all, and I don't want to make anyone sad. But don't you think it's confusing to have 2 houses? Not more confusing than having just one house and thinking about the people in the other house who are missing me." The answer, delivered with the innocent logic of a 4-year-old, echoed through the courtroom. Several people present, including some court employees, seemed touched by little Anna's maturity. The judge made careful notes before continuing. "Mr. Richard, do you have the financial resources to contribute to this arrangement? I understand that the child has special medical needs that are costly." "Yes, Your Honor. My investments in stock, real estate funds and other vehicles allow me to afford any treatment Anna may need. I am willing to fully cover the costs that Mr. Silver's health insurance plan does not cover." "And you," he said to Sarah and Edgar, "are you able to provide a stable home?" "I understand there have been addiction problems in the past." Sarah stood up. "Your Honor, I have completed rehabilitation treatment. I have been clean for 10 months. I have regular psychological follow-up, and I work part-time. Edgar and I are doing couples therapy to rebuild our relationship in a healthy way." "What about the domestic violence mentioned in previous reports?" "The abuser has been permanently removed from our lives," Edgar replied. "I have a restraining order against him, and we have changed our address. Anna will never have contact with that person again." The judge studied all the medical documents, social reports, and psychological evaluations that had accumulated over months of proceedings. Finally, he looked at Anna again. "Anna, do you feel safe with all these adults?" "Yes, very safe. And if at any point you don't feel good about this arrangement, would you tell me?" "I would." The judge paused for a long time, clearly weighing all the variables in an unprecedented situation. Given the exceptional circumstances of this case, and considering that all the adults involved demonstrate genuine concern for the minor's well-being, I will approve this experimental arrangement for a period of 6 months. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room. "However," the judge continued, There will be rigorous supervision, monthly reports from both residences, regular psychological assessments of the child, and any indication that this arrangement is causing confusion or trauma will result in immediate review. We understand, Your Honor, Dr. Adler said. Furthermore, I want to make it clear that this arrangement is temporary. At the end of the 6 months, we will reassess whether it is sustainable in the long term or whether adjustments are necessary. When they left the courthouse, Anna was visibly relieved. "Does that mean I get to stay with everyone?" she asked. "For now, yes," Richard replied, picking her up. "And will I be able to see Wyatt more often?" Edgar smiled. "Much more often. He's your brother, Anna. Brothers need to grow up together." The first days of the new arrangement were challenging for everyone. Anna needed to adapt to having 2 different routines, 2 sets of rules, albeit similar, and 2 distinct family dynamics. At Richard's mansion, she maintained her established routine: private lessons with Margaret, regular medical visits, time in the garden drawing. Richard continued to work from home most days, personally supervising her adaptation. In the smaller house that Sarah and Edgar rented together, Anna discovered the experience of having present biological parents and a baby brother to help care for. Edgar taught her practical things like changing Wyatt's diapers and preparing bottles, while Sarah shared memories of Anna's early childhood that she had almost forgotten. "You used to love bath time," Sarah said one night, while helping Anna get ready for sleep. "You would spend hours playing in the tub with rubber duckies." "I like bath time now too," Anna said. "Margaret taught me how to wash my hair by myself." "Margaret seems to be a very special person." "She is. She takes care of me when I'm sick, and she makes cookies when I'm sad." Sarah felt a pang of something, not exactly jealousy, but a sadness for having missed so many important moments in her daughter's life. "Do you like her more than you like me?" she asked before she could stop herself. Anna looked at her with those big, wise eyes. "Mom, I don't need to like one person more. I can like everyone differently." The answer, so mature for a 4-year-old, made Sarah realize that Anna had developed an extraordinary emotional capacity because of everything she had been through. 3 weeks after the start of the arrangement, the first real crisis arose. Anna got sick with a high fever during a weekend she was spending with Sarah and Edgar. Sarah panicked, her old anxieties about not being able to properly care for her daughter returning in full force. "What if it's a reaction to the medication?" she said to Edgar, pacing nervously around the room while Anna slept restlessly. "What if I don't know how to recognize the symptoms? What if—" "Sandra, calm down," Edgar said, holding her by the shoulders. "Kids get sick. It's normal." But Sarah couldn't calm down. Her hands trembled as she tried to measure Anna's temperature, and she began to have obsessive thoughts about all the possible catastrophic scenarios. It was Anna who, even sick and feverish, noticed her mother's state. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey. Just worried about you. You're not going to use the stuff that made you sleep so much again, are you?" The question hit Sarah like a slap in the face. Anna, even at 4 years old, had learned to associate her mother's stress with a relapse into addiction. It was a connection that a child should never need to make. "No, Anna. Never again. When I get worried now, I call my therapist or Edgar. Or Richard." Sandra hesitated. The thought of calling Richard, admitting she couldn't handle a simple childhood health situation, was humiliating. But looking at Anna's trusting face, she realized that her pride was less important than her daughter's well-being. "Or Richard," she agreed. Richard arrived half an hour later with Margaret, bringing medical supplies and, more importantly, a reassuring presence that immediately calmed both Anna and Sarah. "It's just a simple flu," he said, after examining Anna carefully. "Margaret raised 5 kids. She recognizes the symptoms." Sarah watched how Margaret cared for Anna with natural efficiency, how she adjusted the pillows, how she offered liquids in just the right amount, how she took the temperature without causing alarm. It was the kind of maternal competence Sarah was still developing. "Can you teach me," Sarah asked Margaret, "how to take care of her when she's sick?" Margaret smiled gently. Of course, dear. Mothers learn from each other. That night, while Anna slept peacefully with the fever finally down, the four adults talked in the small kitchen of Sarah and Edgar's house. I don't know if I'm good at this, Sarah admitted. At being a mother. Sometimes I feel like I'm faking knowing what to do. All mothers feel that way sometimes, Margaret said. The difference is that you're willing to learn and ask for help. And you have a support network now, Richard added. You're not alone in this, Edgar held Sarah's hand. And I'm learning too. Before Wyatt was born, I had never held a baby in my life. When Richard and Margaret left that morning, Sarah realized that something had changed. The arrangement was no longer just a division of time with Anna. It was becoming a true, extended family where everyone cared for each other. 2 months after the start of the shared custody arrangement, a medical discovery changed everything again. During a routine appointment, Anna's doctors detected something unexpected in her latest blood tests. Her hormone levels have skyrocketed, the endocrinologist explained to Richard, Sarah, and Edgar, who had insisted on attending all important appointments together. It's a much faster response to treatment than we expected. Is that good or bad? Sarah asked, holding Anna's hand as she sat on the exam table. It's extraordinary, the doctor replied with genuine enthusiasm. Anna is responding to hormone treatment in a way that we see in perhaps 2% of patients. If it continues at this rate, she may reach completely normal height and development. Anna, who had remained quiet throughout the medical consultation, suddenly spoke. Does that mean I'll grow like other kids? Exactly that, princess, said the doctor, smiling at her. It may be that in 2 years you will be normal size for your age. The relief and joy on all the adults' faces were palpable. Richard felt tears of gratitude welling up in his eyes, remembering all the nights he had stayed up worrying about Anna's medical future. Is there any explanation for this positive response? Edgar asked. Several theories, the doctor replied. Adequate nutrition, stable environment, absence of chronic stress, all these factors may have contributed. But mostly I believe it's love. Children who feel safe and loved often respond better to medical treatments. Leaving the doctor's office that afternoon, Anna was more excited than Richard had seen her in months. She practically skipped between the 3 adults, talking about what it would be like to be normal height, to be able to play with other children without looking much smaller. Can I learn to ride a bike when I grow up? She asked Edgar. Of course you can. I'll teach you. And can I wear normal dresses, not baby ones? All the dresses you want, Sandra promised. And when I grow up, will I still live with you 3? The question echoed in the air, reminding everyone that the current arrangement was temporary. In 4 months, they would have to return to court for evaluation, and no one knew if the judge would consider the situation sustainable in the long term. We'll figure that out together, Richard said diplomatically. That night, while Anna slept in the mansion, it was one of her nights with Richard and Margaret, the 3 adults gathered in the living room for a serious conversation they had been postponing for weeks. We need to talk about what we're going to propose to the judge in January, Richard said. Sarah and Edgar exchanged a meaningful look. Actually, Sarah said, Edgar and I have something to tell you. What? Edgar took a deep breath. We've decided to get married. Not out of pressure or for Anna, but because we really love each other and want to build a family together. Richard felt a mix of emotions, genuine joy for the couple, but also fear of what this would mean for his place in Anna's life. Congratulations, he said, forcing a smile. Anna will be happy to know she will have a traditional family. But we don't want that to change our situation, Sarah said quickly. The current arrangement is working. Anna is flourishing. Sandra, be realistic, Richard replied. A judge will look at you. Married biological parents, stable home, adequate income, and at me, a single man with no legal ties to Anna. There will be no competition. What if there were legal ties? Edgar asked suddenly. What do you mean? What if you became Anna's legal guardian, or adopted her along with us? There are precedents for this type of multiple adoption. The suggestion caught Richard completely off guard. You would do that? Richard, Sarah said, her words filled with emotion. You saved my daughter. You took care of her when I couldn't. You gave her stability and love when she needed it most. We're not naive enough to think we can simply erase that and start from scratch. Besides, Edgar added, Anna needs all of us. She has become who she is because of the combination of all our influences. And there are practical advantages too, Sarah continued. You have resources that we'll never have. If Anna needs expensive experimental treatments in the future, or special education, or anything that our salaries can't cover. We don't want your money, Edgar interrupted. We want your presence in her life. But we recognize that financial resources are part of the package. Richard remained silent for a long time, processing the offer. It was more than he had dreamed of, but it also brought responsibilities and complexities that he had not considered. Would Margaret be part of this arrangement? He asked finally. Of course, Sarah replied without hesitation. Anna sees her as a grandmother. We're not going to take that away from her. And when Anna is older, a teenager, how are we going to handle decisions about dating, college, career? Together, Edgar said simply, like any family does, even if it means disagreements. Especially if it means disagreements, Sarah laughed. Families disagree. It's normal. A week later, the proposal was formally presented to Anna. The three adults sat with her in the mansion's library, where she liked to read her picture books. Anna, Sandra began, we want to talk to you about an important change. Anna immediately tensed up. Changes still made her nervous, even when they were positive. Edgar and I are going to get married, Sarah continued. Anna's face lit up, like a real mom and dad. Exactly like a real mom and dad. And that means you, me, Edgar and Wyatt are going to be an official family. Anna processed this for a moment. And Richard and Margaret. They're also going to continue being your family, Richard explained. In fact, we're thinking of making that official too, through adoption. What's adoption? It's when people who aren't blood relatives decide to become family through legal papers, Edgar explained, as if they choose to be family. Anna considered this carefully. So I'm going to have 2 dads, 2 moms and a grandma. The adults laughed at the simplicity with which she summarized the complex situation. Basically, yes, Richard confirmed. And will everyone always love me? Forever, the 3 promised in unison. Anna nodded, as if the whole situation made perfect sense. Okay. But can I choose which house to stay in when I'm mad at someone? The question made everyone laugh. But it also revealed that Anna had instinctively understood one of the practical advantages of the arrangement, multiple support options when she needed them. Within reason, Sarah said, yes. And can I have a dog? Anna, Richard began. 2 dogs? 1 for each house? Edgar and Sarah exchanged amused glances. Let's talk about dogs after the wedding, Edgar said diplomatically. That night, after Anna went to sleep, Margaret approached Richard in the kitchen where he was drinking tea, lost in thought. Are you worried about something? She asked. I'm wondering if we're doing the right thing. If this whole situation isn't too complicated for a child. Margaret sat next to him. Richard, did you see Anna today when she heard the news? Yes. Did she seem confused or worried? No. She seemed relieved. Exactly. Because finally, someone is asking what she wants instead of deciding for her. And what she wants is to keep all of us in her life. What about you? How do you feel about sharing her with more people? Margaret smiled. When my daughter died, I thought I would never be a grandmother again. Anna gave me that second chance. I don't mind sharing her love, as long as she's happy, even if it means less time with her. Love is not a limited resource, Richard. The more Anna receives, the more she will have to give. 2 days later, they received an unexpected call that would test this philosophy. It was the social worker responsible for the case, with news that no one was expecting. "We found relatives of Anna that we didn't know existed," he said. "A great-aunt on the paternal side who learned of the situation through local newspapers. She's claiming family rights." The silence that followed was heavy with the realization that, once again, Anna's future was being threatened by external forces they could not control. Anna's great-aunt, Mrs. Helen, arrived in town on a December afternoon, accompanied by a lawyer and an unwavering determination to meet her great-niece. She was a 70-year-old woman, a widow, with white hair tied in an elegant bun and eyes that vaguely resembled Anna's. The meeting was scheduled to take place at the same neutral location where the supervised visits had begun months ago. Anna, now visibly taller and stronger thanks to the success of the hormone treatment, held Richard's hand as she watched the unknown woman with cautious curiosity. "Anna," Mrs. Gable said in a gentle but firm voice, "I'm your great-aunt Helen, sister of your paternal grandfather." "My grandfather?" Anna asked. "I have a grandfather." "Had. He died when your father was little, but I always wondered if Edgar had had children. When I saw the article in the newspaper about your case—" She paused, emotional. "I knew immediately that you were my family." Edgar, who had remained tense since the woman's arrival, finally spoke. "Mrs. Gable, with all due respect, I didn't know my father had sisters." "Your father and I grew apart after the loss of our parents," she explained. "Silly differences that now seem insignificant. But when I learned that I had a great niece—" Her tears began to run. "I couldn't stay away." Anna studied the older woman's face, seeing in her familiar traits that she recognized in Edgar. "Do you want to take me away too?" The direct question made Mrs. Gable hesitate. "I want to meet you, my dear, and I want you to know that you have a big family, with history and roots." "But I already have a family," Anna said with the brutal honesty of children. "A lot of family." Richard watched the interaction with growing anxiety. One more person claiming rights to Anna meant more legal complications, more uncertainty, more trauma for a child who had finally found stability. "Mrs. Gable," Sandra said diplomatically, "we understand your desire to meet Anna, but she has been through a lot of trauma, and she has finally found an arrangement that works for her." "I understand that," the woman replied. "But you need to understand my perspective too. Anna is the only family I have left. My husband died, we never had children, and I thought I would die without knowing any blood relatives." The genuine pain in Mrs. Gable's voice touched Anna in an unexpected way. "Are you alone?" "I am, my dear. Very alone." Anna looked at Richard, then at Sarah and Edgar, and finally back at Mrs. Gable. "But if you get to know us, you won't be alone anymore." The simplicity of Anna's childlike logic surprised all the adults present. She had immediately understood that the solution was not to take her away from her current family, but to include Mrs. Gable in it. You would like me to be part of your family?" asked Mrs. Gable, clearly emotional. "If you're nice," Anna replied pragmatically, "and if you don't try to take me away from the others." "I would never do that, Mrs. Gable promised. "I just want to be in your life." In the days that followed, Mrs. Gable remained in town, gradually getting to know the complex family dynamics that had formed around Anna. She dined at the mansion with Richard and Margaret, visited the smaller house where Sarah and Edgar lived with Wyatt, and slowly began to understand how the unconventional arrangement really worked. "It's extraordinary," she commented to Richard during a coffee at the mansion. "I've never seen anything like it, but Anna is clearly flourishing. She taught us that family doesn't have to follow traditional rules," Richard replied. "It just needs to be based on love and commitment. And you really make all the important decisions together?" "All of them. Medical, educational, disciplinary. Sometimes we disagree, but we always reach a consensus before acting." Mrs. Gable nodded thoughtfully. "And financially? How does it work?" Richard explained the arrangement they had developed. He covered specialized medical costs and emergencies. Edgar contributed his part through his work's health insurance plan. Sandra took care of day-to-day expenses when Anna was with them, and Margaret managed the household needs at the mansion. "And you?" Richard asked. "What are you looking for exactly? What would be your role in this family?" Mrs. Gable hesitated before answering. "I'm a retired teacher. I have a large empty house, a decent pension, and a lot of free time. I thought maybe I could be the grandmother Anna never had, help with homework, tell family stories, be available when you're all busy." The proposal was tempting, but it also further complicated an already complex situation. What if Anna doesn't adapt to having one more person in her life? "Then I accept whatever level of relationship she is comfortable having," Mrs. Gable replied without hesitation. "Even if it's just birthday cards and occasional visits." It was Margaret who suggested the definitive test. "Why don't we let Anna decide? She has shown herself to be very wise about these things." The next night, all the important adults in Anna's life gathered. Richard, Margaret, Sandra, Edgar, with Wyatt sleeping in his arms, and Mrs. Gable. Anna was sitting in the center of the group like a small judge presiding over a family court. "Anna," Richard said, "Mrs. Gable would like to be part of our family. What do you think?" Anna carefully studied the older woman's face. "Do you know how to make cookies?" "Yes, I do, especially chocolate chip cookies." "And will you fight with the others when they disagree about me?" Mrs. Gable laughed. "I promise to try to be a voice of peace when there are disagreements." "And if I make art on the walls, will you be mad?" "It depends on the art. If it's pretty, maybe we can frame it." Anna nodded, satisfied with the answers. "Then you can stay, but you have to help take care of Wyatt too. He's my brother." "It would be an honor," Mrs. Gable said, tears running down her face. Edgar spoke up. "Anna, are you sure? This means one more house to visit, more rules to remember." "No," Anna said, shaking her head. "It means more people to love me when I'm sad, and more people to share the good things when I'm happy." 2 months later, in February, everyone was back in court for the final evaluation of the custody arrangement. This time, the group had grown to include Mrs. Gable, who had officially moved to the city and rented a house 5 minutes from Richard's mansion. The judge studied the reports that had accumulated during the 6-month trial period. Medical reports showing Anna's exceptional progress, psychological evaluations indicating growing emotional stability, excellent school reports, and above all, detailed observations on how a 4-year-old child had managed to maintain healthy relationships with 5 different adults. "This is certainly the most unusual custody situation I have ever witnessed," said the judge, "but the results speak for themselves. Anna is healthy, happy, and clearly loved. Your Honor, Dr. Adler said, the parties would like to propose the permanent formalization of this arrangement through multiple adoption." "Explain to me how that would work legally." "Sandra and Edgar would have primary custody as married biological parents. Richard would be a secondary adopter with specific custody rights. Mrs. Gable would be officially recognized as a support guardian. Margaret, although without formal legal status, would be recognized as a designated caregiver." The judge turned to Anna. "Anna, after all these months, are you still happy with this arrangement?" "Very happy," she replied with conviction. "I have the best family in the world. And if someday you want changes, then I'll talk to everyone and we'll figure it out together." The judge smiled, the first time anyone had seen him do so during all the hearings. "Very well. Considering the exceptional maturity demonstrated by all those involved and the clearly positive results for the minor, I approve the permanent formalization of this arrangement." The explosion of joy in the courtroom was audible. Anna jumped from her chair and ran to hug each adult, while Wyatt, now a giggling 8-month-old baby, clapped as if he understood that something wonderful had happened. 6 months later, on a sunny September afternoon, Anna was in the mansion's garden teaching Wyatt to crawl. At 5 years old, she had grown significantly and finally looked like a normal child for her age. Her hair shone in the sun, her cheeks had a healthy color, and most importantly, her eyes shone with the confidence of a child who knew she was loved unconditionally. "Wyatt, look," she said, pointing to a bird that had landed in the nearby tree. "It's a cardinal. Mrs. Gable taught me its name." Richard watched the scene from the porch next to Sandra and Edgar, who had come to pick up Anna to spend the weekend at their house. Margaret was preparing a special snack in the kitchen, and Mrs. Gable had arrived earlier to help Anna with a school project about family trees. "Do you regret it?" Sandra asked Richard. "Having complicated your life so drastically?" Richard looked at Anna, who was now singing a song to Wyatt as he tried to reach the flowers in the garden. "Never," he replied without hesitation. "She didn't complicate my life. She gave me a life." "And us?" Edgar asked. "Do you regret having to share Anna with us?" "Edgar," Richard said, placing his hand on the shoulder of the man who had become not only Anna's co-parent, but a genuine friend. "Family doesn't divide. Family multiplies." At that moment, Anna ran up to them, carrying Wyatt in her arms with more strength than a 5-year-old would normally manage. But Anna was not a normal child. She was a child who had learned that love has no limits, that family is a choice, and that even stories that begin with pain can have extraordinarily happy endings. "Can I stay up later tonight?" she asked. "I want to see the stars with everyone." "Of course you can," 5 voices answered at the same time. And that night, in the garden of the mansion, under a starry September sky, a family that had been formed in the most unlikely way possible gathered to admire the stars and give thanks for all the impossible coincidences that had brought them together. Anna, nestled among all the adults who loved her, looked up and made a silent wish, not for herself, for she already had everything she could want, but for all the other lost children in the world, so that they too could find their own impossible families and their own happy endings. And in the quiet of that perfect night, it seemed possible to believe that some wishes really came true. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.